My name is Jess and welcome to the Storyteller Fox. Come along and listen to read aloud books, be it for bedtime, story time, or simply to read along. Today is a story from the fairy tale collection. This story is titled Little Red Riding Hood, based on the story by the Brothers Grimm and illustrated by Mike Gordon. This story is retold by Susanna Davidson and read aloud by the Storyteller Fox. Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, there was a kind little girl called Little Red Riding Hood. She always wore a bright red cloak with a bright red hood. "I love it so much I never take it off," she declared. Little Red Riding Hood lived with her mother on the edge of some deep, dark woods. This is the map of the deep, dark woods by Little Red Riding Hood. Mother Red Riding Hood, and that's her, me, our little cottage, and this is the picture that she drew, Granny's cottage, Granny Red Riding Hood. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother gave her a pot of vegetable soup. "Take this to your grandmother," she said. "She's not feeling well. But remember the rules of the woods," her mother added. "Rules of the woods. Number 1, keep to the path. Number 2, don't talk to wolves." "I will," promised Little Red Riding Hood, and she set off. At first, the sun shone and the birds sang. Little Red Riding Hood hummed a little tune, bent down to tie her shoelace, skipped along the path, and stopped to smell the flowers. "Good morning, Little Red Riding Hood," called a woodcutter. "Good morning," said Little Red Riding Hood, waving to him. Little Red Riding Hood walked deeper and deeper into the woods. It grew darker and darker. Then the sun hid behind the clouds and it got darker still. So Little Red Riding Hood didn't see the path, the wolf waiting for her on the path. And the wolf didn't see Little Red Riding Hood either. Little Red Riding Hood stepped on the wolf's tail, then on his paw, and dropped her basket smack on his head. "Look where you're going," said the wolf huffily. "But you were in the middle of the path," said Little Red Riding Hood. She had forgotten the rules. Don't talk to wolves. "What have you got in that basket?" said the wolf hungrily. "Vegetable soup," replied Little Red Riding Hood. "I'm taking it to my grandmother." "Vegetables?" cried the wolf. "How revolting! Wolves only eat juicy red meat. I never touch vegetables," he added. The wolf was about to gobble up Little Red Riding Hood, but then he had an idea. "Perhaps I can eat Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother, he thought. He put on his softest voice. Where do your grandmother live? Where does your grandmother live? He asked. In the cottage on the other side of the woods, said Little Red Riding Hood. How perfect, thought the wolf, rubbing his tummy. How delicious. Why don't you take her some flowers? He suggested. That's a lovely idea, thought Little Red Riding Hood. What a kind wolf you are, said Little Red Riding Hood. So Little Red Riding Hood left the path to look for flowers, and the wolf raced off to the grandmother's house. He knocked lightly on the door. Tap, tap, tap. Who's there? Asked the grandmother. Your granddaughter, Little Red Riding Hood, squeaked the wolf. I've brought you some lovely vegetable soup. Let yourself in, said the grandmother. I'm too weak to get up. The wolf leaped into the room. He gobbled up Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother. Then he climbed into bed to wait for Little Red Riding Hood. Soon he heard a knock at the door. Who's there? He said. Your granddaughter, Little Red Riding Hood. Let yourself in, called the wolf. I'm too weak to get up. He pulled on the grandmother's cap and hid under the blankets. I bought you some vegetable soup, said Little Red Riding Hood. Lovely, snarled the wolf. I mean lovely, he added in a squeak. Put the basket on the stool and come and sit next to me. Little Red Riding Hood looked at her grandmother. She looked again. Oh, grandmother, she said. What big ears you have. All the better to hear you with, said the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood came closer to the bed. Oh, grandmother, she said. What big eyes you have. All the better to see you with, said the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood came closer still. Oh, grandmother, she said. What big hairy hands you have. All the better to hug you with, said the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood was now standing right next to the bed. But, grandmother, she cried, what big sharp teeth you have. All the better to eat you with, snapped the wolf. He jumped out of bed and gobbled up Little Red Riding Hood. Full at last, he said, licking his lips. Then he lay down on the bed to sleep. As the wolf slept, he snored very loudly. He snored so loudly the woodcutter heard him. I've never heard that woman, the old woman, snore that loudly, he thought. I'll just make sure she's okay. But the woodcutter couldn't see the grandmother anywhere, only a very fat wolf. Oh no, thought the woodcutter. The wolf's eaten the old woman. Just then, the woodcutter had an idea. Perhaps the old woman is still inside you. I might be able to save her. He picked up some scissors, then he snipped open the wolf's tummy. Snip, snip! He saw a bright red hood. Snip, snip! Little Red Riding Hood's head popped out. Pew! Keep cutting, she cried. Grandmother's still in there. Snippety snip! Faster and faster, the woodcutter kept cutting until Grandmother popped out. Did I fall asleep? Thought Grandmother. Quick as a flash, Little Red Riding Hood ran outside and picked up lots of stones. The woodcutter put them in the wolf's tummy, and the grandmother sewed the tummy up. Then the wolf woke up. He tried to sneak out of the door, but the stones rattled inside him. Rattle, rattle, rattle. Now everyone can hear you coming, said the woodcutter, laughing. But I'll never catch anyone, cried the wolf. Exactly, said the woodcutter. You'll just have to eat vegetables instead, said Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf never ate another person. As for Little Red Riding Hood, she never, ever talked to a wolf again. Little Red Riding Hood was first written down by two brothers, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. About 200 years ago, the Grimm brothers lived in Germany and liked collecting lots of very grim stories. So how did you like this story? Well, I hope you've enjoyed it. The end. And that's the end of our story time. For more bedtime stories, you can check on our YouTube playlist or listen to more storytime compilations at the Storyteller Fox. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.